and then we'll give Eric as much time as he needs. Let's pray together. Our dear God, we thank you tonight for this day that you've given us. We thank you for every day of our lives. We especially thank you for this one and this time we have together here as a group of Christians to try to learn more about you and about our faith and maybe some good reasons for us to grow in our faith. We thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for Eric coming this way and speaking to us tonight, and we pray for open ears and open eyes, open hearts, and open minds, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Such an honor to be with you all tonight. I bring you greetings from Apologetics Press in Montgomery, Alabama. All those many miles down there, which, you know, when you got interstates, except when you get on Interstate 65 between Birmingham and Montgomery, have you been to the beach in a while and been on that interstate? It can get clogged up. So anyway, bring you greetings from there and also from the Wetumpka Church of Christ in Wetumpka, Alabama. Most of you are wondering, what was that word you just said? Wetumpka means rumbling waters. Some of you are HGTV fans and you know Wetumpka because Ben and Aaron have been to our little town, and you know who Ben and Aaron are. They're the hometown makeover people, and they came and took over our town, and they called it Hometown Takeover. And so they kind of, you know, put Wetumpka, little town of Wetumpka, I think about 8,000 people on the map, and that's where I've called home for a number of years now, and just love to be a member of God's church. Amen? Isn't that just awesome? It's to be married to Jesus, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, to be a Christian, to be in the family of God, and then to have local congregations like this where we have family members who bless our lives. And I'm richly blessed to be with you all tonight and count it a true honor and a privilege. You all have helped us in our work at AP through the years, and I'm very grateful for that. We thank you for your support, your prayerful support. And if you're ever coming down on I-65 through Montgomery, please come by 230 Landmark Drive. We're about a mile away from a university called Faulkner University, maybe 2 miles, and we're about maybe 6 or 7 miles off of the interstate I-65. So listen, we have really good peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that we make. I try to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't try to, I get to. Like, it's my favorite food, I think, in the world. I was at a camp a week. How did I get off on the subject? I was just inviting you to come have lunch with us, anytime, but I was in Colorado about a week ago or so. And my favorite meal, like over and over again at this retreat center I was at, was just, these peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So we've got that. We also have tuna fish, but most people prefer peanut butter and jelly. Come by and see us. By the way, if you want to know about apologetics, feel free to go to our website. Apologetics comes from the Greek word apologia. You can find it in various places in your New Testament. In the English translations, it will appear in words in the word answer or defense. Be ready always to give an answer or a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear, there in 1 Peter 3:15. And so it's from that word apologia that we get our English words defend or answer. And when we think about Christian evidences or apologetics, we're thinking about giving people answers to questions that they have, especially about the most important stuff in the world. And listen, as important as, if you've been to school, most people have, whether you are homeschooled, private schooled, public schooled, or whatever, a lot of people, they'll memorize the 50 states, or they'll memorize, all of the presidents of U.S. history. And maybe that's important. And maybe you've memorized other facts, you know a number of things. But if there really is someone who knows everything historically speaking, everything in the past, everything in the present, and everything in the future that will happen, if there is one who knows that, and then who is not only all-knowing, but all-powerful. I was at a church camp yesterday, and I walked past this guy. His name's Corey. I've known him for a few years, and he just, he lifts weights all the time. Like, this dude is just, he doesn't need guns. He's just got these huge arms that he could just squish someone to believe. Someone who walks in a room who looks like, they could lift a school bus with their pinky finger. They they just almost demand a little bit of attention. Maybe they don't seek it or want it, they just are that strong. Our God, if he exists, is all-powerful. And then he's always existed, which is just hard to wrap our minds around. My point is, if such a being exists, who is perfect, who's never done anything wrong, who is so perfect, he is actually the standard of right and wrong, of righteousness, and he's 100% just. He never shows favoritism toward anything or anyone. If such a being exists, then coming to a knowledge of that has to be, logically speaking, the most important truth that you could ever contemplate and conclude that it is true. I'm not suggesting that that's the only thing that matters, coming to that mental acceptance and acknowledgement of, but it would be the most fundamental, foundational, important thought. Most of our lives, you would have to admit, I think we would have to, most of our days they're taken up with just kind of monotonous thoughts. Like, I got hungry today around 2 o'clock or so. I thought, I'm going to have a late lunch. I was driving up here. It'd kind of be a lupper, half lunch, half supper. And so there's this burger place I don't get to eat much at home. It's called Freddy's, right? I think I stopped at Freddy's in Jackson. And, I had my mind on Freddy's for a while because I knew I was coming up to Freddy's. But, is that a very deep thought? It's just not. Where's my phone? I think that, like most of you, probably about 30 or 40 times a day. What do I do with my phone? Where is my phone? It's funny, my wife can see anything and everything in a refrigerator that I can't see, but she doesn't know where her phone is 50 times a day. We have a lot of different thoughts, but there's just nothing that comes close to, doesn't come close to whether or not there is a God. And it's one of the most frequently asked questions to religious people, and increasingly asked among Christians. Probably the most frequent question I was asked as a kid growing up in Oklahoma in the 80s. Oh, the wonderful 80s. Wow. Mom used to let me go to school. I'd walk or ride a bike to school. I was like 7 years old, and she didn't think anything about it. I'd go about a mile or two, and the 80s, that's something else. But, I think the most frequently asked question I got in the 80s was, what are you? They weren't wondering if I was a human being or an animal. They were just wondering, they were not, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but they didn't wonder if I was a boy or a girl. I mean, that's not what their question was. They were wondering, what am I, like, religiously? And specifically, they were just wondering, what kind of Christian are you? Which gave an opportunity to talk to them about how, hey, I'm just a Christian. I just want to be a follower of Jesus Christ. But today, one of the most frequently asked questions you get is, how do you know there is a God? And how do you know that the God of the Bible exists? All right, I'm going to go through these slides kind of quickly tonight, if I can, just for the sake of time. It might seem like a long time to you, but it will seem kind of short to me. I would contend that it makes perfect sense to believe in a maker, in an absolute, eternal, uncreated creator of everything other than his eternal self, because in the physical realm, matter demands a maker. It just does. I mean, where did everything come from in the physical realm? Where did Earth come from? Where did all the other planets in our solar system come from? Where did what astronomers tell us are literally billions of galaxies come from? Where'd they come? Where did everything, did it come about by a purely naturalistic Big Bang or an infinite, mighty God? Let me share with you the conclusion of an article that was written a few years ago in New Scientist magazine, where the author, an atheistic evolutionist, was writing about, well, maybe this was the cause or origin of the universe, or maybe it was this, or maybe it was this, maybe this is the best scientific model. And then he came to the conclusion of his article. And so I'm going to read to you here, show you the conclusion of this article that David Shiga wrote a few years ago. He said, the most likely outcome, however, is that none of these, what he called models, or kind of explanations or possible explanations, will be proved correct anytime soon. Indeed, the quest to understand the origin of the universe seems destined to continue until we can answer a deeper question. Why is there anything at all instead of nothing? Now, why would an atheistic evolutionist ask this question at the conclusion of his article? I think you probably know the answer to that. He's written this article. He wrote it kind of about 6 weeks after another article had come out, 6 weeks earlier, where there were a lot of admissions by an evolutionary astrophysicist who was saying, yeah, there's really not any proof for Big Bang Theory. It's interesting. I've heard Christians defend Big Bang Theory more kind of seriously than I've heard a number of atheistic evolutionists who've poked a lot of holes in that theory. I guess there's only one thing I can kind of appreciate about Big Bang Theory, is that it actually implies that there must have been a beginning to the universe. But I want to get back to what David Shiga said here. He says, why is there anything at all instead of nothing? He asked this question because if at one time in our physical realm there was actually no physical realm and there was nothing in this realm because there wasn't a physical realm, then why is there a physical realm today? Because if you have 0 physical realms and we have one today, right now, well, no, it's not happening right now. You don't have universes popping into existence. On national television, I guess it was about 12 years ago now, I think it was 12 years ago, that Richard Dawkins, who's probably the most famous atheist in the world today, he was asked on national television, ABC Australia, you can go to YouTube and find the clip, and he was asked, how do you get something from nothing? And this was his response on national television. He said, of course it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. It doesn't seem right or natural. Of course, get this, he said, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Well, he kind of nailed it there, didn't he? I don't know if he realized that, but I mean, he first says common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing, and then he talks about how it's got to be pretty mysterious. Well, God is. The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but those things that are revealed belong to us and to our children, right? His ways are, I know in Isaiah 55, 8, and 9, he's talking in context more about the mercy and long-suffering and patience and grace of God, but when he says, God's thoughts are not our thoughts, neither are his ways our ways. They're higher than our ways. Well, I don't know exactly what Richard Dawkins was thinking, but he kind of, trailed off eventually and left this point. But he says, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. One day a young skeptic said to an elderly woman, he said, I once believed in God, but since studying evolutionary science, I'm convinced that God is but an empty word. The lady replied, well, I've not studied evolution, but since you have, maybe you can tell me whence came this egg. Why, of course, from the hen was the reply. And where did the hen come from? Why the egg? And perhaps, said the lady, you can tell me which existed first. Well, he said the hen came. The hen, of course, rejoined the young man. To which the woman responded, you mean that the hen existed without having come from an egg? Oh, no, said the young man. I should have said the egg was first. And her response was, then you mean that an egg existed without having come from a hen? The man cried, you've got me all mixed up. And so she drove home her point. Young man, since you can't explain the existence of even a hen or an egg without God, you can't expect me to believe that you can explain the existence of the whole universe without him. You don't have to have a degree in science to know that matter demands a maker. Let me see where, this is a nice little device you got here. Sometimes I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing. You don't have to have a PhD in microbiology or in astrophysics or some other field of science. You don't have to have a mathematical background. I think you do need a little sense, and most people have at least a little sense. But people respond, well, wait just a minute. What is it that caused God? I mean, if God is the cause of it all, where did God come from? There's something known as the law of cause and effect, which, by the way, does a tiny infinitesimal, less than a period-sized ball of matter that exploded, is that a logical, really, does that sound like a logical cause for the origin of an orderly universe? Explosion of some tiny speck of matter? Which, by the way, that tiny speck of matter still has to be explained. Like, where did that come from? They don't just pop into existence from nothing. So says the first law of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics referring to heat and energy. In nature, matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed, says that law of science. But a more fundamental thought of reality is that every material must have an adequate antecedent or simultaneous cause. If I told you that I got up here today on the back of a blue jay, that's kind of weird. You know, if I told you that I was watching a baseball game and, you know, Aaron Judge, I believe that's the player's name for the New York Yankees, not that I'm a Yankees fan, but if I told you he hit a home run 500 feet, you might believe it. But if I told you he hit it with a wet swimming noodle, you know, those little foam type noodles, whatever they're made out of, that oftentimes you'll see in swimming pools, well, that doesn't make any sense. We just understand causes and effects. It's not that difficult. So where did God come from then? That's a fair question to ask. I understand why people ask it, because in our physical realm, we're used to seeing causes and effects. But first of all, notice that the whole understanding of all laws of science are based upon what we study, what we recognize in nature. We see animals giving birth to animals. We see humans giving birth to humans. That's the law of biogenesis at work. And we didn't create that law. We just observe it, and that's what's going on in the natural realm. And what goes on in the natural realm is every material effect has an adequate antecedent or simultaneous cause. Well, what about God? Well, first of all, God is not natural. He's not physical. The law of cause and effect doesn't apply to him any more than the first law of thermodynamics applies to him, any more than the law of biogenesis applies to him, or any of the other natural laws. He's a super creator. Furthermore, asking about where God came from is, logically speaking, it's like asking, when did eternity begin? And you would say, well, Eric, by definition, eternity did not have a beginning. Well, when does eternity end? Well, by definition, it doesn't end. And by definition, God did not have a cause. Matter demands a maker. So says the first law of thermodynamics. So says the second law of thermodynamics, which indicates that really the universe is not eternal. And very few scientists, very few unbelieving, atheistic, evolutionary scientists even contend that the universe is eternal. There wouldn't be a point in coming up with an idea of the origin of the universe, like with a Big Bang theory, if the universe is eternal. And the second law of thermodynamics tells us that matter and energy tend to run from a more usable state to a less usable state over time. It's like the universe is a clock that has wound up, that has been wound up, that is winding down. That may not make us feel very good, except for the fact that as Christians, this world is not our home. As we sing, we're just passing through. We are sojourners. We're like Abraham, who left the Ur of Chaldees, who went into the land of Canaan to dwell in tents for decades. Well, we are here for a few years, but what we can know, so say various laws of science, is that matter demands a maker. We shouldn't be surprised by this. We shouldn't be surprised that the house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. Both heaven and earth reveal that the things which are seen were not made, Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 3, were not made of things which are visible. I believe that Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1 is an absolutely logical statement. It's logical. God began Holy Writ with, in the beginning, He, God, created the heavens and the earth. So here would be a logical syllogism for us. Every material effect must have a cause that came before it or was simultaneous to it and is greater than it. Well, the universe is a material effect. Where did it come from? Therefore, the universe must have a cause that came before it and is greater than it. I would contend that it's quite logical to come to the conclusion that there is a God, and that God is the God of the Bible, because matter demands a maker, and God's Word has revealed to us that this maker is God, and that this is a logical argument. Second, this evening, life absolutely demands a life giver. Is this not just one of the most precious pictures that you've seen today? Life demands a life giver. We've known for a few hundred years now. I mean, we've scientifically speaking, that spontaneous generation, that life coming from non-life simply does not happen. You might remember from some of your science textbooks when you were in school, or some of you might still be in school, seeing those pictures of meat in the jar, some of them in open jars, some of them in jars that had gauze on top of it, some of them in jars that were sealed shut, and these were experiments done by Francisco Redi, who proved back in the 1600s that life comes from life and that of its own kind, that life doesn't spontaneously generate from nothing or from non-life, but people still wondered, well, maybe on a microscopic level it does, and so we had Louis Pasteur, who came along about 200 years later and proved, scientifically speaking, that life, even on a microscopic level, only comes from life. We've known for years that the story of atheistic evolution can't deal with the law of biogenesis, that life comes from life and that of its own kind. According to evolution, so says an evolutionist, that every tree, every blade of grass, every creature in the sea and on the land evolved out of one parent strand of molecular matter drifting lazily in a warm pool. What concrete evidence supports that remarkable theory of the origin of life? Well, there is none. It's as my friend Mike Houts, who's done some lecturing, he works with NASA, he writes for us some at Apologetic Press. I believe you can go to our homepage on our website this week. By the way, all of this information you can find on our website in a number of different forms. We have an article called 7 Reasons to Believe in God. We have a free PDF book on our website called Reasons to Believe. This is chapter 1 of that book. I'm not getting to all of it, but some of it. And Dr. Mike Houts does a lecture on how evolution is religion, not science. They believe this, and it's not even good religion, okay? I don't believe in the idea of taking a leap of faith to believe in God that's not based on evidence. We come to believe that there is the truth based on the truth. Jesus said, for example, in John chapter 10, verses 37 and 38, that if he does not do the work of his Father, do not believe me. That's what he said. If he doesn't do the things that God would do if he came to earth to prove that he was God in the flesh, then don't believe him. But he did do those things. He offered the evidence in the form of fulfillment of predictive prophecy, in the form of the miracles that he worked, in the form of a great miracle, his resurrection from the dead, not to mention the fact that he perfectly taught the Scriptures, he lived a perfect life, and he was worthy of worship. What we have is every day seeing in the material realm the fact that in nature all life comes from life, previous life, of its own kind. And evolutionists have known this. They have admitted to this. One of the more well-known atheistic evolutionists of last century, Dr. George Gaylord Simpson, said there is no serious doubt that biogenesis is the rule, that life comes only from other life. For the sake of time, I want to skip a couple of slides, but I want to introduce you to a man by the name of Dr. George Wald. He was a Nobel laureate of Harvard University a few years ago, or several years ago now. who was talking about, basically where life came from. We've got a copy of the article back at our offices at Apologetics Press. He said the reasonable view was to believe in spontaneous generation, the only alternative. So he's saying you got two alternatives, two options. Here's an atheistic evolutionist saying this. Not me, not a creationist, not a Christian. The reasonable view was to believe in spontaneous generation, the only alternative belief in a single primary act of supernatural creation. He says there is no third position. And then he went on to write, most modern biologists, having reviewed with satisfaction the downfall of the spontaneous generation hypothesis, yet unwilling to accept the alternative belief of special creation, are left with nothing. I think a scientist has no choice but to approach the origin of life through a hypothesis of spontaneous generation. A Harvard scientist, lecturer, Nobel laureate, who says, hey, spontaneous generation doesn't happen. That only leaves special creation. We don't have any other logical options. That's it. And he says, to paraphrase Paul, I refuse to have God in my knowledge. I choose to believe in that which science says does not happen. So how did life get here? I believe in the God of the Bible because everything that the Bible says is consistent with what we see and what we can learn truth from God's natural revelation. That is the physical realm. Paul would say, for since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that anyone who doesn't believe in Him, are without excuse. How did life get here? Well, isn't it interesting that in the very first chapter of the Bible, we learn. We don't have to doubt once we come to know that the Bible, based on evidence, is the Word of God, that God created every living thing according to their kind. Oh, that's interesting. Think about the law of biogenesis. In nature, life comes from life, and that of its what? Of its own kind. You might have a puppy or a kitten or a cat, a dog at your house, like I have at my house. I had him now for about 14 years. He is he's a mutt. He's an accident, had some friends. I think, do they always give out dogs at VBS? I think we got our dogs at the Wetumpka VBS 14 years ago. And, some of our friends, the Hethcoxes, said, hey, we got this Springer Spaniel, and there was a weenie dog next door, and now we got this Spring Weenie. That's what they were calling it anyway. So will you want one? And, our kids we had two dogs that ran away. I don't know what happened. I guess they got some beachfront property somewhere. They just dug a hole. They ran away. We never saw them again. Oh, I'd like to think that maybe one day we'll be reunited. I doubt it, but anyway. So we okay, Bo, Mike, and Shelby, you can have this mutt that they're trying to sell us give it to us as a spring weenie. Dogs come from dogs. They always have, except you have to explain where the first dog came from. Whatever that dog looked like, I doubt it looked like a Great Dane or I call them Chihuahuas, Chihuahuas. I say Chihuahua so I know how to spell it. I don't know what the first dog looked like, but probably not like my dog or your dog, but it was of the dog kind. And dogs, they reproduce after their kind. That's what we see. Cows have cows. Dogs have dogs. Rhinos have rhinos. Giraffes have giraffes. Now, there can be variations within kinds, and we see it, right? I mean, I've got family members that have a Chihuahua. And at one time, they had a Weimaraner, I believe it's called. I mean, those are two very different size dogs. But isn't it interesting that we know this from observation in the physical realm, and that's exactly what God's Word has said for 3,500 years. Notice, let me back up here, that the law of biogenesis says that life comes from life of its own kind. Evolution says this is kind of how it was, the tree of life. You got an amoeba that gives way to a worm, fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal, lower mammal, maybe a lemur or monkey type creature, ape, man, and human, right? Well, that just defies what we see in nature. What we see in nature, this contradicts these kinds of illustrations. Material universe, life arises from previously existing life of its own kind. Life cannot, it does not, so says the law of biogenesis, spontaneously generate from non-living chemicals. Thus, a supernatural, intelligent mind must have created living things. Number 3, this evening, design demands a designer. You know this, and I know this. Listen, I've got a 2008 Toyota Sienna I bought with 100,000 miles on it several years ago. Now I got about 285,000 miles. You know, whoever, now you don't talk about some smart people. I got another Toyota Sienna, y'all. It's a 2001. It's a quarter of a century old, basically. And it uses a little oil, but it's still running. Listen, I've had 2 kids who've gotten out of college. I still got one in college. I'm trying to help them out, and so we're just driving some old cars. I'm just saying, whoever made those machines, and then the tuners who keep them tuned up, oh, you know that doesn't happen by accident. Your grand piano that you have or some other musical instrument didn't come about accidentally. No one says that. No one says that about their house, about their computer, about this fancy iPad here. It doesn't come about accidentally. If you go to apologeticpress.org, you can find this book. You can buy it in hard copy form for like $5. Maybe you can buy, I think you can buy like 20 of them for $2.50. I'm not a salesman. I'm just kind of telling you about this. But I just want to read to you. You can find it in article form or in book form, also electronically on our website. What we've learned about protons and electrons in terms of their design in our physical realm. This comes from page 11 of our book, Reasons to Believe. The ratio of the mass of an electron to a proton is 1 to 1,836, which means that a proton is 1,836 times more massive than an electron. Sorry, I don't have this memorized, and I'm not, a credentialed scientist, so I'm going to read this to you. Even with this mass difference, electrons and protons have the same electrical charge. Scientists suggest to us that if the electrical charge of the electron were altered by 1 part in 100 billion, our bodies would instantly explode. Now, I'm not making that up. You can go to find the reference on our website. Just 1 in 100 billion, if there was that slight of a change. Of course, I've heard that our planet Earth leaves a straight line, 1/9 of an inch every 18 miles as it orbits the sun. And they say if it changed 1/8 of an inch or 1/10 of an inch, life would be impossible on this earth. And we're supposed to believe all that happened because of an accidental explosion some 14 billion years ago. Complex functional design demands an adequate explanation. The logical argument is, if you were to break it down in premise 1, premise 2, and conclusion, is if the universe shows complex functional design, then there must have been a designer. The universe does show complex functional design, thus the universe must have had a designer. If this demands a designer, and every person who is not joking and not lying and has some sense about them knows that this, who wouldn't want this little cool, solar system on their desk or in their house? Who wouldn't want to have this gadget, this model? And yet, this solar system, which is a small part of the Milky Way galaxy, which is a small part of our gargantuan universe, is said to be the result of mindless, accidental explosions? I choose to believe, based upon evidence, that the psalmist was exactly right when he said, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork." day unto day utter speech, and night, it doesn't matter if you're talking about the daytime or the nighttime. Night and the night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. It doesn't matter where you live, what language you speak, you can know these things to be true. The heavens declare the glory of God. Their line or their voice has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. I don't see anything in Holy Writ that tells us anyone has an excuse. Any person who has reached an age of mental maturity, an excuse to doubt the fact that there is a God. Again, I'm going to move along here, but just mention to you that though atheistic evolutionists insist that the earth and all living things on it have no grand intelligent designer, they often refer to the amazing design in nature. And I'll just give you one example, but Dr. Michael Shermer, whom my good friend Kyle Butt, who I believe may be coming here next week, is that right? I hope that you will be back next week. One of my best friends, great gospel preacher. He debated Dr. Michael Shermer just a few months ago in Montgomery, Alabama. And Michael said in his book, Why Darwin Matters, he admitted that the design inference comes naturally. The reason people think that a designer created the world is because it looks designed. Well, yeah, I got to admit, that is one of the big reasons that I believe that God designed the universe and everything in it, especially Earth and everything on planet Earth, is because it looks designed. Listen, how can you get design without purpose, intelligence, and deliberate planning? If you were to simply look up the word design in the dictionary, whether it be Webster's or maybe the American Heritage Dictionary of the English language, you're going to see that it demands purpose. An individual or a group who have had purpose in view, deliberate purposive planning, a detailed plan, that requires intelligence. Intelligence demands an intelligent creator. I mean, the combined, I know you all don't know me very well, and I don't know you very well, but I have no doubt that the combined intelligence in this room is just astounding. And we just ask the basic question, well, where would all that intelligence come from? You know, I was in the Rocky Mountains, I mentioned about a week and a half ago. I saw some big rocks, y'all. And I saw one that looked so good that I just had to thank him for what little intelligence I have. Thank you, rocks. Thank you, dirt. Thank you, water. Saw some nice lakes out there. What? Okay, so where do the Ben Carsons of the world? You know, Ben Carson, I have one, I get sick at the sight of blood almost. I mean, my wife can talk about something like, oh, no. No. Let's not go there. I think of people like doctors like Ben Carson who not only can look at stuff like that, but they know what to do, and they can perform surgeries on the most complex matter in the known matter in the physical universe, the human brain. Where did Ben Carson get his intelligence? Well, from, mom and dad. I mean, I realize there's effort and learning and growing. I get that. But the capacity to acquire knowledge and to build upon that knowledge, intelligence. Where did the first intelligent beings come from? Anything that possesses intelligence in nature must have been caused by something intelligent. Organisms such as animals and humans possess intelligence. I'm not suggesting that animals have the intelligence on the level with human beings, but I do know that my dog, when he wants to go outside, he can kind of look at me and bark, and he'll look at the door, and he'll run to the door, and he'll look at me and, come on, man, I'm going to go outside. And when he wants to eat, he knows where the dog food is. And so he'll run to that pantry door where we keep it, and he'll look at me and he'll bark. And when Jana's making chocolate chip cookies, he knows where those are. especially when they're coming out of the stove. It's like, hey, I want some of those. I'm like, sorry, buddy, you can have dog food. Those chocolate chip cookies, they're not going into your mouth, okay? Sorry. But, I mean, he's got a level of intelligence. Where did it come from? Where did the first animals come? Where did the first intelligent human beings come from? From ape-like creatures? Okay, let's just say, for the sake of argumentation, okay, they came from ape-like creatures. Where did they come from? Where did they? Oh, well, some might say, I heard one atheistic evolutionist say, well, you know, life, and maybe ultimately intelligent life, came here on the back of some kind of comet. Okay, whatever, but okay, so where did that come from? Where did the first intelligent life source come from? From non-intelligence? That does not compute. It does not make sense. Animals and humans must have been created by an intelligent being. Fifthly, this evening, and this is a powerful consideration or study or proof, argumentation for God, morality demands a moral law giver. In Francis Beckwith and Gregory Kukel's book, Relativism, they said those who deny obvious moral values, moral rules, who say that murder and rape are morally benign, like kind of neutral, like, you know, might be, might not be, that cruelty is not a vice, and that cowardice is a virtue. You ever met someone who, oh man, cowards are awesome. I love cowards. I want to be a coward. No one says that. I mean, we might act that way sometimes, but it's not a virtue. They do not, they said, merely have a different moral point of view. They have something wrong with them. And I'm not quoting these individuals to say, oh, well, this is proof of this. I'm just making the point that, you know, you ever waiting in line at an amusement park, or maybe you're down in Disney World and you've waited for an hour and a half to ride that really cool ride at Animal Kingdom. I forgot what it's called, but I think it's like an Avatar ride or something like that. It's one of the coolest things I've ridden, I have to say that. But you ever, you know, wait in line for 2 hours and people cut in line? And you're like, well, I love it when people, everybody just loves that. That is just, I mean, that's a rule, you know, just a more, no. I've never seen anyone in my life say, well, I just love it when people don't act fair. Isn't it something that we might not always agree on stuff, but everyone has a sense of justice and injustice, fairness and unfairness. The moral argument says if God does not exist, then objective moral values, this is one way to word it, kind of more from the negative standpoint, then objective moral values do not exist. Objective moral values do exist, do they not? Well, if so, therefore God exists. No rational, atheistic explanations exist for morality. Has an explosion ever resulted in morality? Wow, 4th of July, we popped some fireworks and firecrackers, and we just created some, well, I think a lot morally minded after 4th of July, don't y'all? No. Are there such things as moral minerals or wrong rocks? Boy, I got this rock on my desk, and it teaches me morality, and sometimes that rock misbehaves, and no, that's not really how that works. Do animals accuse each other? Or do humans accuse animals of being evil? I might call my dog, dog, you a bad dog. But we're not having a moral discussion here. Komodo dragons, 10% of their diet, as I recall, is other Komodo dragons. They just eat themselves, their own kind. Is that where we learn our morals from? When have our alleged animal ancestors ever contemplated morality? Thomas B. Warren, back in 1976, I don't remember this debate, I was 1 year old at the time, but he debated Antony Flew. Man, I love kids, don't y'all? I just love them. Awesome. Boy, if I had that much energy, whoo, I need to get it. I need to start working out so I can run down the church. I just love it. Yeah, I might not run, but anyway, it's all good. I love it. I just got through with church camp yesterday. I was at church camp, so I think I have ADD, y'all, because I get a little distracted when I'm preaching sometimes. Love kids. What was I saying here? Well, what I'm saying is that Brother Thomas B. Warren debated the most well-known atheistic philosopher in the world, at that time. I mean, I think most people would admit that. Antony Flew back in 1976. And he talked to a great extent about this argument. And he said, the truth of the matter is the basic implication of the atheistic system does not allow objective moral right and objective moral wrong. The atheistic system does not allow this. And I think most people would admit that. They might say, well, you know, these things evolved. If they evolved, then they can just evolve still. Like if it's maybe right or wrong today, it might evolve into something else tomorrow. Who's to say it wouldn't? So the conundrum for atheists in terms of morality demanding a moral lawgiver is that they either admit that objective morality, something that is outside of your, feeling or subjective view on a matter. You might like the St. Louis Cardinals. I like the Atlanta Braves. Who is right? Sorry. Some of you like the Chicago Cubs, and that's all right too. Some of you like the Tennessee Titans, some of you like the Atlanta Falcons, and some of you, like me, don't really care a whole lot about the NFL. I mean, listen, I grew up in Oklahoma. Y'all forgive me now, okay? I'm a Sooners fan. One of my best friends in school, his son is now playing for Oklahoma State, so I'm going to have to try to root a little bit for Oklahoma State now. But, if I tell you that, I'm this fan and you're that fan, and my team is this and your team is that, and I like green and you like blue, that's your favorite color. Well, who's right and who's wrong? Well, that's just subjective opinions on things. But what about morality? Well, atheists either have to admit that objective morality exists, yet refuse the only logical conclusion that God exists, or they must allege that everything is relative, that anything goes. Wait just a minute. Imagine that world. Anything goes. Maybe it's just, majority rules. Well, who says that the majority is right? Throughout biblical history, what we find is that oftentimes the majority is who is wrong, and it's that remnant who is doing right. So is it right to cheat? Is it wrong? Is it right to hurt? Is it right to beat up someone? Is it right to, if you are hungry and they have food and you don't, well, I'll just take their food because might makes right? I mean, imagine living in such a world where, this is how French atheistic philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said it. He said, everything is indeed permitted if God does not exist. If God does not exist. And if God does not exist, well, you can see why the psalmist would have said, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. If you take the idea that there is no higher power and standard of morality to its logical conclusion, theoretically at least, then you're saying that anything goes. And boy, I don't want to live in the world that Noah lived in, where every intent of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continually. I would contend that we can logically argue that the Bible's supernatural attributes demand a supernatural author. What's supernatural about the Bible? Well, I'll sum it up with maybe one sentence here. To err is human, but the Bible writers did that which was humanly impossible. To err is human, but the Bible writers were correct about everything they wrote, about the past, about the present day in which they lived, and even about the future. The future. No truthful, sane person contends that they really know exactly what's going to happen in the future. Have y'all seen what's happened in politics the last, 10 or 20 years? Like, did you really know all those things were going to happen. Sports. Did you really know who was going to go out in the first round of the NCAA tournament? Who was going to go out the second round? I mean, have you filled out one of those brackets before? Listen, I can tell you, we don't know the future because the person at Apologetics Press who knew the least, absolute least about basketball, doesn't care about basketball, her name is Jana. She's my wife. She's a part-time secretary there, and she won the bracket challenge last year. It was just, blind luck, chance, never, she hasn't seen a basketball game, I don't think, in years. I love her to death. Listen, she knows a lot about a lot of other things, just not about basketball. And she would say, who cares? And she won. I wonder if the Lord's trying to teach us a lesson there about that. And I know some of us are like, man, how did you let that happen, Eric? Because I don't know the future. One of my teams, I think it was Auburn. I thought, well, Auburn, they're going to go far this year. I think they went out in the first or second round. I pass every day on the way to Apologetics Press from Wetumpka to Montgomery. I pass a place that has a neon, flashing light. Come, let me tell you your future and read your palm and all this stuff. You know what's never there? Is business. Never. In years that I've been driving by. If people thought that the person in that place of business actually knew the future, do you think they would pay good money to find out what the future was? But that person doesn't know the future. But isn't it amazing that there are hundreds of times in Scripture where God predicted the future? And so precisely like Micah 700 years before the Messiah came into the world said in the days of King Ahaz and Hezekiah, during the time of Isaiah, he said that of all the towns in Judah, the little town of Bethlehem Ephrathah, from Bethlehem Ephrathah would come the one who is from everlasting to everlasting. The Messiah came and was born in Bethlehem, exactly like Micah said. He was crucified exactly like Isaiah said he would 700 years before that time. The Bible's supernatural attributes demand a supernatural author. That's why I believe that the God of the Bible is absolutely in existence and always has been. And finally, this evening, we can know that the historical miracle-working, resurrected Jesus demands a supernatural explanation. As we close, I just want to read to you something that Dan Barker said a few years ago. Dan Barker is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation in Madison, Wisconsin. And he was asked about, what would disprove atheists. And he said, if Jesus were to materialize and work any number of deeds, atheism would be disproven. And the God of the Bible would show to be true. I quoted part of that and was summarizing some of the rest of it. In that same television panel discussion that was on television down in Australia back in 2012, Richard Dawkins was asked what proof, by the way, would change your mind regarding atheism. And this is what he said. He said, that is a very difficult and interesting question because, I used to think that if somehow, great big giant 900-foot-high Jesus with a voice like Paul Robeson suddenly strode in and said, I exist, here I am. But even that, I actually sometimes wonder if that would, and then it faded out, or he faded away. What these two leading atheists in the world have said is that if God came to earth, and now Richard Dawkins said, great big 900-foot-high Jesus, it's always more than what it was. Some people just refuse, and they always want more and more and more evidence, they say. But here's the thing. God provided exactly what these men said, in a sense, what they were looking for, what they would say would prove that God, and specifically the God of the Bible, exists, if that God came to earth. And he did exactly that some 2,000 years ago. Do you believe that the God of the Bible exists? It's the most fundamental, foundational, important truth upon which everything else rests. But it's not the end. You know, one of the saddest things I've heard in a while was on a YouTube video that I saw recently that I'll just summarize to you as we offer Jesus' invitation, where a Christian apologist was answering questions, and there was a gentleman who was at the microphone, and the apologist asked the gentleman, he said, now, if Orthodox Christianity is true, you know, would you become a Christian? And he said, you know, explain. The guy said, explain, what do you mean by Christian? He said, well, you know, just like following Jesus and giving your life to Jesus, trust in Jesus. And he quoted from John 14:15. You know, if you believe me, keep my commandments. You know, Christianity, if it is true. And the gentleman eventually went on to say, well, if I agreed with what that God said. If I agreed. You know, it's sad that people refuse the God of the Bible. And it's not always because they disbelieve in God's existence, or maybe even in the God of the Bible's existence. They just refuse to do everything that God says. You know, there was a man who came to Jesus and said, good teacher, what shall I do that I may inherit eternal life? And he was right with the Lord until Jesus told him to do something that he didn't want to do. You know, if that's our life, we're not following Jesus. We're not following the Creator. Jesus, who is the Creator. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. Is there anything tonight in your life that's getting in the way of you totally submitting to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? If so, come to Jesus tonight. God is worthy of everything. Satan took almost everything from Job. And you remember what Job said? At the end of that first chapter, he said, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Life is hard. It can be very difficult. And God knew that. Maybe it's a challenge for all of us. It doesn't matter. Good days, bad days, easy days, hard days, whatever day it is, whatever day I'm living, one day at a time, give it all to God. Give your all to God. You know, we not only must come, it's not only the fool who said there is no God. The Bible tells us in Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 7 that the beginning of knowledge is found in fearing God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Let's not despise God's instruction on how to become a Christian through faith, confession of that faith, turning away from sin and turning to God in the watery grave of baptism, being immersed for the forgiveness of our sins. And let's not despise God telling us to be trusting every day, following God until the last breath that we take. Let's not play with the one precious life that God has given us. Let's go at it. Let's follow Jesus and let's help other people follow Jesus. If you need to respond to Jesus' invitation by becoming a Christian or rededicating your life to the Lord, won't you come as we stand, as we sing?